Hello and welcome to Business on the Wire. The Information Technology or the Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code Rules for 2021, loosely called the Intermediary Rules, were announced a few days back. What seems patently clear is that they seek to fundamentally change the way the internet will be experienced in India. While there are two separate parts that deal with social media and media intermediaries, basically WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, etc., there's a separate section that has announced sweeping changes for the digital news and digital content space. What are these changes and what do they point towards? Joining me to talk about that are Ritu Kapoor, co-founder of The Quint, Dhanya Rajendran, who's co-founder and editor-in-chief of the News Minute, and M.K. Venu, founding editor of The Wire. Thank you, all of you, for joining in. Venu, I want to start by putting in baby steps to the context of this for someone who's trying to understand it. What is the standing principle behind this act? I mean, what do you think is the thought process behind it?
The thought process, in my view, is the government's anxiety or the government's recent spat with Twitter. The manner in which the farm protests happened, and the manner in which, following the farm protests, the manner in which the farmers' movement got massive global supports on social media. I think the government was overwhelmed by that. This government has always, government and the party, BJP, and its ecosystem has always been very confident about dominating the social media, which on this occasion they were totally overwhelmed. And now that was, in my view, that might have been the trigger, because I remember Ravi Shankar Prasad, IT minister, saying in Parliament at that time also that we are going to virtually saying that we'll make Twitter, listen to us. We'll change the law if needed. So I think that was the immediate trigger. But before this, there have been many occasions where self-regulation has been talked about in the context of OTT during pandemic, as the INB minister said that OTT associations have been talking to him about self-regulation, etc. And all these panel of 6 people and all had been discussed between OTT players and the government. But when you speak to OTT players, they also say it was only strictly self-regulation. They are saying that it was not. They never thought that the government would start actually dictating terms to them. Anyway, that aside,
Yeah.
And also there was a broader background, I would say, where the way fake narratives were getting built, and surprisingly, most of them coming from right-wing politics, like the Jamali Tablighi Jamaat narrative,
yeah.
Sushant Singh Rajput narrative, where Bombay High Court, very strong indictment of media, the television media.
Trial by press, so to speak.
Trial by press. Bombay High Court saying that if next time it happens, they would invoke penal provision against, So I think these are the things that have been happening in the backdrop. But mainly, I think they were troubled by Twitter.
Yeah. Dhanya, as Venu was pointing out, there's different verticals to this. There's what happens to OTT, there is what happens to social intermediaries like Twitter. But for the purpose of this conversation, we're really kind of digging deep on digital news media. And a lot of counter arguments were made saying, why doesn't digital news media come under the press council directives or the press council mandate? Be that as it may, there is also a question mark on why this law pertains only to digital news media. Does it not? I mean, why does this not extend to any other form of media?
Well, Mithali, I think the question should be why do these rules pertain to the digital media? In fact, the government has tried to club us with social media platforms and OTTs, calling us intermediaries. Now, that's how the entire rule has been drafted. So I'm saying the definition itself is flawed, where you're calling media organizations that do journalism, that put out content, as intermediaries. They're not intermediaries. Firstly, we can call the definition itself flawed. The other point is that the government is saying that the Press Council of India is there. There is a code of ethics for broadcast TV channels. Why not for digital? The government is forgetting is that whatever code of ethics is applicable to television or print today is through parliament sanction. That it's through a parliament enactment, and that has not happened here. Simply the government wants to bring in these rules So they have made some changes and amendments to previous rules and included. So why is there no parliament sanction for this? And the biggest point is, we are all for self-regulation. Nobody here is saying that media should be unregulated. People can do what they want, because clearly we do not do what we want. As media professionals, as people who run organizations, all of us work within the restrictions prescribed to us in the Article 19 of the Constitution. Whatever restrictions are applicable to press freedom, everything applies to us. So we do not operate in a very free world that way. And we are all for self-regulation. In fact, all of us have spoken many times about self-regulation. But what the government is suggesting is costly, it is subjective, and it gives the executive much more rights than what they should be entitled to.
I'm going
And
to come.
powers.
Yeah, I'm going to come to that legal point in just a second. But Ritu, I want to draw you in as well in terms of what your stand is on this. Do you agree? Is the definition itself flawed? Is it a problem with the fact that you're trying to fix something that perhaps does need a relook through this self-regulation mechanism? Is that the best solution here?
I think there are several problems. One is that, like Dhanya pointed out, it is, the IT Act of 2000 does not have news as a category, digital news as a category. And to have taken that into its purview, to have jurisdiction over that without a parliamentary discussion is highly problematic, because it sort of, goes against the principle of the Constitution and Article 19 and freedom of speech. That's one. The other thing on, yes, self-regulation is the way to go. There is already a lot of self-regulation in digital media in place. There is, any private citizen can currently take legal recourse on anything they find objectionable on a digital platform. We know of the number of defamation cases that are being fought by digital only sites. So it's not like there is no regulation or that there is no self-regulation. I think one of the problems that I think we need to look at is the fact that even the self-regulatory bodies that they are suggesting as tier 2 of the redressal mechanism, even that regulatory body the composition of the regulatory body has to be approved by the MIB. So, you've already defined saying that there must be an eminent person, a senior judge of the High Court or the Supreme Court, or somebody who works in the human rights space. Having defined that, to say that we will then say whether that self-regulatory body is approved. So everything at every stage to be approved by the government or a government body, that completely takes away from the Atmanirbhar self-regulation that is being, this whole thing is being positioned largely as that, right? But if you read between the lines, there's a lot of problem. Also, all of us post our content on social media, on the SSMIs or the intermediaries. Now, anyone can go in and without checking with the publisher, the social media platform can just block us or can be taking the content down without there being any kind of a process of hearing or questioning or investigation. It's all and a lot of the language is very open to multiple interpretations. A lot of the language has been kept vague. Like do they need to have a compliance officer? Do they not need to have a compliance officer? So yeah, if we can step back and get into a conversation with MIB or MeitY or whoever, or even so-called the oversight committee, and get into a conversation on how we are defining self-regulation, and that has to be a conversation.
Yeah. Just to finish up Ritu's point, Venu, on this foreign publication issue where they've said there should be, a physical office, there should be a grievance officer. What if there is not? For example, for a New York Times, are we then saying that they will have to block content to India? How will this work?
Yeah, as Ritu said, the way things are worded at the moment, open to interpretations. I think they describe they call it what business activity or something to that effect.
Territorial presence is one of the requirements for digital.
Systematic business activity.
Yeah.
Systematic, consistent.
Yeah,
something.
you're right, Ritu. Systematic business activity where they say it need not be registered in India.
Yeah.
Those registered, of course, are being will be government will have a stranglehold over them.
Yeah.
Not registered, which means the Washington Post and the New York Times and others
Yeah.
who do write on India or who provide, and they have bureaus in India, they are also covered in this as per the wide the range that of interpretation that this is open to, right? These words. Now they are governed by US laws. So what this government is not contending with, even when regulating, say, Facebook or Twitter, you can do deals with Facebook or Twitter.
As was Twitter's stand most recently.
Yeah. But
yeah.
you cannot have Facebook or Twitter agree to a principle where they are forced to compromise on their US free speech laws. That cannot happen because the US government will get involved. Yeah. And they cannot do this to Washington Post or New York Times because again the US laws, they will cite US laws because they will say India has no jurisdiction. Then what happens is what happened in China when the Chinese put many years ago pressure on these guys, social media platform, big ones, from the democratic, from mature democracy. Yeah. They just withdrew. So China built its own. Now I don't know whether India plans to do that. So whether India is thinking of not. I don't think Modi can. Prime Minister and BJP IT cell, they love Twitter and Facebook because they have used Twitter and Facebook much more than anybody else in this country, right? You remember those internal Facebook documents, 1,000 fake pages before Delhi elections, and then Facebook India had saying we've lit a fire for Modi's election 2014. So I think my take is they are not intending to go after the big tech. With big tech, they will do deals. They are going after small digital news media like us, that we are discussing, Quint or News Minute and others.
Yeah. What's also problematic in this, Dhanya, as Ritu just touched upon, is that 3-tier cake that has been set up in terms of oversight. I know it's been termed as soft touch oversight mechanism, but that's clearly not what it is, right? I mean, there's a lot of onerous control that's now coming in via those 3 tiers.
So it's actually 4 layers. It's not even 3 anymore. The first is where a person, a reader or a viewer can send a grievance, and within 15 days we have to respond. The second, if that is the response is not satisfactory, they can go to the self-regulating regulatory mechanism, which consists of that former judge and others, a panel. And this panel, how many ever numbers can be there, which means DigiPub, of which we all are part of, can have a panel. Somebody else can have a different panel. So there'll be different panels. The third layer is the interministerial committee, which will have people from different ministries. And the fourth layer is the secretary of the IT department, who has emergency powers to block any content. Now, it sounds really nice when someone says that, oh, people will be able to send grievances to websites about content. And I do agree that there are many players out there who are not monitored. There's a lot of content which is floated. But the point is that this kind of a grievance system which the government is mooting, there is high possibility of it being misused. And that is the biggest concern. The second is a costly and subjective exercise. Subjective being, at the end of the day, we are at the mercy of a bureaucrat who will eventually be the adjudicator who decides whether the content is to be allowed or not allowed. And when those are the powers not envisaged under the constitution, I think clearly there is no separation of power here. You are eventually telling a committee of bureaucrats that they will decide whether a content is acceptable or not. And imagine the kind of harassment that news organizations can be put through. Like The Wire does a story tomorrow, which the BJP does not like, or the Aam Aadmi Party or Congress does not like. They can simply activate their IT cells into sending us like thousands of grievances, right? And would we just be sitting and replying to these grievances? I mean, what does the government expect?
Ritu, what's also problematic, perhaps, the most problematic thing over here is this emergency blocking powers. The intermediary rules say that they provide emergency powers to the Ministry of INB where, and, quote unquote, no delay is acceptable. They can issue directions for blocking of online content to persons. Now, the thing also is, how do you do this when you have a digital platform and you have a physical newspaper? What does the Hindu do if there is a story, for example, that is unacceptable on digital, but it's gone out in print?
Yeah, and likewise for television channels which have entities as well, right? It's the same stories that will be playing on the television channel, and that will be running on. And so, where do you draw? Where does the grievance get addressed? Another problem is that I might have got a grievance from a reader or from any entity, and I might have, in my capacity of my grievance or compliance officer, may have addressed it. But it is up to the self-regulatory body first, and then to the interministerial, and then to the joint secretary of the MIB to say whether they feel whether the grievance has been addressed or not. So it's highly subjective. Now, and all of this is coming in a time of, say, the Tandav matter, right? Now, Tandav guys are saying, we will take down a certain dialogue, or we will, edit the scene. We've also apologized, but that is not being seen. Currently, it's in the courts and not with this regulatory mechanism. But that is being seen as, no, this is not good enough. Who decides whether, if there is a self-regulatory body, why is it that the self-regulatory body, if self-regulation is the intention, and this is a soft oversight, who decides at what point has a grievance been addressed? Who, and this emergency thing under the 69A of the IT, Section 69A of the IT Act, we're in a time of hyper-nationalism, what is, and at a time of so many people being, whose sentiments get offended virtually, every hour, every day, and, trolls in the IT cells, like, who decides when the sovereignty and integrity of India has been questioned? By what? Also, does the family man in that one scene question the sovereignty integrity of India? So I to the point that Venu is happening, I think social medias and reigning in social media platforms is definitely part of the reason. But I also think the kind of independence that digital sites have had in their investigative journalism, and the kind of content that OTTs, which in a sense are a reflection of current affairs, they're mirroring what is happening. So in that sense, they're newsy in that sense, and they have been raising questions, and I think that's making things a little uncomfortable. So I think there's a lot that is being attempted to be wrapped up.
And it's written like that, no, Venu? I mean, even for OTT, it says, consideration of India's multiracial, multi-religious context, exercise due caution and discretion.
See, OTT, you're right, but I broadly agree with Ritu. But OTT is different from pure news platforms in one respect. OTT is also has to do with free expression, but free creative expression. So it also deals with fiction. Journalism deals with facts. Journalism informs the public. So therefore, the public's right to be informed falls. The sanctity of that is much more within the Article 19(1)(a). Right now, that's why I'm saying that it is unprecedented. I have not seen 5-6 bureaucrats. George Orwell very famously said that what the government tries to hide is what is news. Rest of it is advertising. But there are 5 secretaries of the government. One is the emergency power with the INB secretary. Then the interdepartmental committee, according to the rules, say that there will be some officials from 5 ministries, including women and child development, defense, some home ministry. So this entire bureaucracy have become super editors now, of news platforms. So they have become super censors, which is unprecedented, which has never happened. And I think India's democratic credentials, I have studied the Australian laws and other laws, media laws of mature Western democracies. News is completely out, and they club newspaper and news digital, put it one basket, and there are different sets, different sets of self-regulation for others. So this is this is not done anywhere. So our democratic credentials are at stake actually.
It also bears mentioning, Venu, that for Section 2, which is the social media intermediaries, there was at least a consultative process held with the Ministry of IT. In this case, my understanding is that there was no consultative process held between the Ministry of INB and
the emergency
NEB.
power to the INB secretary says he can take down any content without even giving publisher a hearing. Now, they will have to put in place a mechanism to do that. I mean, how do they just, if Dhanya files or Ritu's reporter has filed a great investigation, part 1, part 2, before part 2 comes, part 1 has been taken down, So, how do you deal with this, And, I want to make another point.
Also,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm just saying, sorry for butting in, Venu, but I'm just saying that news also in digital news, there is an element of creative interpretation. Now, if what the Deshbhakt does, Deshbhakt is also going to come under the purview of this jurisdiction, right? Or something like News Laundry, they do a lot of satire. Now, suddenly, I think there's going to be a lot of looking over our shoulders where we are being creative with news on a news site.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying this, so there's a little bit of blurring there. Sorry for having button.
No,
Dhanya, I just wanted to ask you also, the point that you were making about, look, most digital news outfits are very small, lean, mean machines, This is extremely onerous cost burden, legal burden, all of that's getting piled on organizations irrespective of their size, is it not? I mean, you could be a 2-member team or a 20-member team. Now, everybody gets bunged under this.
If I did hear it correctly, you're asking about the burden it puts on publishers.
That's right. Yes, legal and
there
cost.
Is tremendous burden on the publishers. As I said, we have to have a grievance redressal officer. And then if somebody is not happy with the way we have addressed that grievance, like what is this grievance? There is absolutely no clarity on what kind of a grievance can someone raise. Is it a factual error which someone can raise a grievance about? There is one part which is very random, I would say, that says anything which threatens a public order, which threatens the security of the country, etc. So when Disha Ravi was arrested, a lot of us reported on why toolkits are normal, that the government is actually exaggerating this toolkit part a lot. Now, would that story be considered against public order then? Can people write grievances saying, I disagree with your story? And the other thing I don't get in this rules is what is the penalty if, let's say, I as a publisher do not address the grievance of someone who's written to me? Is everything going to end up in blocking, or is it blocking that particular page, or will a publisher get blocked? There is no clarity on what the action taken would be. So it's unambiguous in many ways. And like I said, the beginning of it, the interpretation that news publishers are intermediaries, the flaw starts from there itself.
As
you want to add?
As you said, it's a news. You take any newspaper, Hindu or say Express, 85-90% of content that is there in the newspaper, what is described as loosely like folded sheets as per the law, the rules. So the same thing is there in the digital version. So then to keep exempt newspaper from these laws and put the digital into the OTT basket, the other basket, is creating a false category in my view. This by itself should get struck down.
Let me ask all three of you, this question. Ritu, perhaps I could start with you. In terms of what this means for a viewer, what is the big takeaway over here for someone who is looking to access news or is looking to access OTT content? Because often, the indictment is saying, hey, you guys are, you're making a big noise because this affects you. But I think what is going perhaps not as well understood is that this one impacts everyone.
See, I think it impacts the user reader in many ways. One is, of course, this is going to lead to a lot of self-censorship. There's going to be a lot of, like you said, a lot of the digital outfits are very lean, mean. We cannot deal. You don't want to get into regulatory bureaucracies, red tape. So you'll try and look at everything 3 times, 4 times over and see whether you want to put it out, whether you want to, which you'll start selecting which battles you want to fight. And in the process of this self-censorship, there will be very controlled content that perhaps reaches a lot of the readers. And in those cases where, let's say where the Quint say, we're not going to be looking over our shoulders, but we're going to put it out. But the chances are that some of the content that we put out suddenly is seen as must be emergency blocking without delay because it is, inciting public disorder or whatever. That's one. The other thing, if you look at it a little carefully, is see a lot of our readers or viewers consume news content through social media platforms. Now it's suggesting a voluntary verification on social media platforms for users. And we've known in the past when voluntary moves very quietly or quickly to mandatory. And this is all happening in the absence of data protection laws, which means I, as a user, my data, my privacy and anonymity is under threat. The other thing, of course, there are 2 ways of looking at it, is now the tracing the originator of content. Well, if it is used selectively, then it could be a misuse of end-to-end encryption. So there is, apart from, my fundamental right as a user under Article 19, if I put out something on social media, even if I comment on a news story, I may be subject to being pulled down. So I'm going to be that guarded about what I'm saying. There will be those who choose to, be that much more circumspect about what they as publishers choose to put out. Because remember, alongside this already, there is a lot of litigation that is happening. There's, FIRs against, it's very, a sedition charge is so easily put against a journalist today. So that's the environment in which these laws have come out. So the real casualties of this.
In fact, sometimes I wonder, I'm not at the risk of sounding cynical. If you are filing sedition cases against editors, why is the need for all these rules, you have such draconian FIRs against
We're there,
so many FIRs against us for doing legitimate stories, and sedition cases against editors they were filed for what? For merely looking at whether a farmer who died allegedly in an accident, or was he,
and for a tweet,
for a tweet. No, Wire did a story on that, and we spoke to the family of the boy who died, and we spoke to the hospital authorities, and the police authorities put their version also, but there is an FIR against us on the same ground. So if this is their attitude, then they might as well just resort to sedition. We'll fight that in the court. Now we are having to fight those cases, sedition, and having to fight new rules also.
So Mitali, just to add to what they said, there is already so much intimidation, right? Like there are laws of defamation, sedition, everything is anyway used against the media in legitimate cases and in cases where there is it is just purely for intimidation. And now you're going to add one more layer to it. See, it's not like we are operating without any legal restrictions on us. We are answerable to everyone, and anyone can file a case against us according to the criminal law or defamation or even case of sedition. Then why have one more layer? And since the viewers watching this will be wondering, how does it impact them? Because it's really going to impact you guys who are the companies. That's not so. If in any country where the freedom of press is impacted, the first person who suffers is a citizen. Even if OTT platforms, you look at a Netflix or Amazon Prime, the content that you have been watching for the last few months has been so bold, has been so different from what your Hindi and other serials have been churning out day in and day out, and also from your movies. Now, if the government brings in censoring, now they're only saying that we want an age ban on movies, like 13 plus, 18 plus. But that's a first step of censoring, right? You as a viewer are going to be the most impacted if censoring comes in everywhere, whether it's in news or in the creative fields.
No, you're absolutely right. On some issues, bipartisan consensus should exist. And Danya raises an important point, Venu. I mean, some amount of tightening of policy was perhaps inevitable because this is again a space that grew very fast and not in a very, structured manner. But laws to combat unlawful content already exist.
Yeah.
They're in place, but they're just not being put in the spirit of the law that they should or as consistently as they should.
Yeah, they're all there. They're in place. In fact, I want to make another point here. If you remember, the UPSC jihad case went to the Supreme Court, right? Where a television channel had done a series on how UPSC was, the IAS was being infiltrated by the Muslims, minorities. Now, it was a ridiculous, absurd story, which the Supreme Court judges also said, how can this, I mean, they were shocked, how can this pass? So, and then the Supreme Court asked the government to file an affidavit saying, how can you control all this? So I remember the government in its affidavit said, it is not just television channels, we have to curb, or we have to address digital platforms, because it is digital platforms which make things go viral. The word used by, it's in the affidavit. So basically, when you say platforms that make things go viral, you're talking about Facebook, the big platform. We don't make things go viral. Quint doesn't make things go viral, or or Newsminute doesn't. We just put out facts. It goes on it's true that these are big distribution platforms for us. So they make things go viral. So that was what they wanted to address, right? So now they're using that to then put a noose around the news producers. I mean, the news generators, which is the news platforms. So it's very clear. It's very clear. It's not even, I would say it's not even disguised. They are very clearly, government wants to attack news. Of course, the other things they are doing, they are negotiating with the bigger platforms and all that. That's an ongoing process. That was happening before also. And to the point of what Dhanya was saying, tracing the original the originator of a fake narrative, I would want WhatsApp to tell us at least for once end-to-end encryption. If they tell us who originated Tablighi Jamaat narrative, who originated Sushant Singh Rajput narrative, I think it will be a revelation where it came from. It came from the highest quarter.
Tanya, I just wanted to come to you on how you see this getting resolved. Where do you see this headed?
I don't know. I'm sure most people will go to court, like OTT platforms, social media platforms, even news, because clearly the government has made up its mind. In fact, we had written to the government 2 months ago saying that we would like to be part of a conversation. That never happened. In the press conference, Prakash Javadekar, when asked, did he consult any digital media portals, he said, who are they? Who should we consult? Very surprising for a minister sitting in Delhi to be not aware of digital media sites working out of Delhi, but he is part of government rules to actually put restrictions on them. So if he doesn't know which digital media platform works in the country, then why have rules for them? So we have no great hope that the government will engage in talks, but we really hope so. We can continue to hope so. Otherwise, this will have to be challenged in court, more so by the OTT platforms, I feel, and of course by social media platforms too. At the end of the day, I think others too will challenge this, Vitali, because end-to-end encryption, there is a challenge to it now. It also affects privacy. It has privacy concerns. So I think this will go to court. That's the only way this will be resolved. But what the court decides is not up to us to say now.
Venu, you agree? Because as we mentioned right at the start, there is a legal question around this. Does the executive have the power for this?
Yeah, it is this definitely completely changes the existing constitutional framework that governs free speech, and I would say that executive does not have the power to do this. They have bypassed Parliament completely. I would even further say that even if Parliament passes such a law, the Supreme Court is the final arbiter to determine whether it is constitutional or not. If you remember Rajiv Gandhi's time, a bill was prepared, draft bill, censorship bill was done. At that time, of course, journalists were much more united. We demonstrated on Boat Club, some 300-400 of us. Everybody was there. We protested against the bill. So the Supreme Court is the final arbiter. So we hope the courts will look at the constitutionality of this whole thing, and whether executive, how much is it intruding into the the domain of how much of violation of Article 19(1), even Article 14. It's for the courts to interpret now.
Thank you, Venu. Thank you, Ritu. Thank you, Dhanya. I think the most important takeaway is, do remember, this affects everyone. It's not just about one digital news company versus another OTT platform. This one affects everyone. So it's time to do a deep think about it. Thank you for watching.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.